everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of the second season of Contact Lost, a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k in Poland and abroad. I'm your host, Tweak, and with me behind the mic is my friend and a co-host, Joker.
Hey guys.
So, plenty of stuff happened in Europe this week when it comes to Warhammer. We had Coventry Super Major in the UK. We had the Swedish Team Championships, which we hopefully will talk about next week, or, well, in one of the future episodes. But all this has been overshadowed by G-Dubs themselves, who, quite surprisingly, without any warning, an unprecedented event, they dropped something that in the esports world is described as a patch. So, we invited a special guest. He will help us, he will lend us his expertise and tell us what this patch could mean to the entire game. So let me welcome and introduce to you none other than the Omnissiah's most diligent disciple, a guy who wins tournament after tournament here in Poland, Mr. Patrick Majson Mike. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Good to have you. So let's start with you. to our listeners who might not know who you are exactly, who have not heard about you, people from outside of Poland perhaps, who are you, how long have you been in the hobby, what armies have you played, and why are you an expert on Admech now?
Okay, so basically I'm playing Warhammer for 40k since 5th edition. But I started my competitive experience with 8, so I got quite a long stop for 6th and 7th edition. I started playing with then Imperial Guard, and I played that for about a year. And then I started to test some other solutions. So basically, I do not stick to one army. I usually select one main army for a given season. For this season, I selected, as you might know, Admech, because it's competitively it was one of the best armies in the metagame. So that was my selection for the last tournaments. And also recently I played some Harlequins, and the last season I spent on Sisters. So
okay, that's an interesting selection.
Yeah.
So is there any pattern, any maybe play style that you're going for in your armies, or like are you going for something fresh every season? Because those armies that you named, like Harlequins, Sisters, Admech, they are very different. So what is it that makes you choose an army?
I usually look for something fresh in terms of mechanics. I know that I do not like defensive style, so I will never play an army such as Death Guard or such as slow moving things, because it's just not for me, and I know I will not play that, and I don't have limitations for the other play styles. So I just select something which is fresh, which gives me some interesting mechanics. So I very like playing Sisters thanks to Miracle Dice. So it's something unique for this specific army. Even before the Sisters, I played Gene Stealer cards for a couple of months, and I've also played some tournaments with that. And the Blips mechanism, called Ambush, is also something unique. And basically I try to look for such a stuff and to use this in the game.
Okay, sounds like armies that have a pretty high skill cap, or a high threshold, because Gene Stealer cults, Harlequins, even Sisters, all those seem to be quite demanding. So have you had any success?
Just not Admech. Admech is simple.
An auto win.
Yeah, unfortunately. So
So we are here today to check if this is still true, if this what we've just said still holds. But we just last one question before we jump to that. I wanted to know because you've been, as I said, you've been dominating the scene, the Polish scene, in the recent months. I've heard of you winning the 3-city heresy. I think you were somewhere at the top when it comes to like the Polish team championships, and even in the last doubles tournament in Międzyrzecz, but you also came in first or second. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think first.
First place, all of
Yeah,
those.
yeah, exactly. So insane results. Does that translate to any ambition, any hunger for more? What is your plan for the future?
I always hunger for more because it's in the hobby I try to find as much fun as is possible, and I very like team tournaments, and when going to team tournaments I'm always playing for top results, top places, and my ambition for this current season is to go to international tournaments and to try to play for top results there. But yeah, my focus would be for team tournaments, because singles are sometimes really random for me. That's why I prefer playing team tournaments when you can avoid, or you can. Of course, there will be some top armies like Admech there, but you can try to find a counter for it, find something that gives us points in this specific matchup, or we can just even do something like a roll-off for Admech versus Admech. You can just make this not too much painful that you play in such a meta like today.
Speaking of the meta, hopefully there will be some changes after, when was that? Yesterday, 2 days ago, that they released it, by the time we're recording this. This week, either way. So let's jump to the Dataslate itself. I think the most interesting thing to read is that this begins a quarterly update cycle, which is, well, it's more common than we've had it in 8th, where we had 2 big FAQs and then a chapter approved somewhere along the way, and the dates usually slipped, so we'll see how they keep up with it now. What do you think about the idea of the quarterly updates?
Personally, I think that it's a very interesting format, and I like this format because big FAQs before was you can never expect what's there. They stated that there will be no point updates in big FAQs, and suddenly there was. And here we know what we can expect for the future. So we can see that they changes the rules, they changes data sheets, they changes points values, and at least from what I saw by looking at the current patch document, I think that this is a very good way forward. It seems that they managed to find out what's very bad to the game, but of course we'll have to see and test some solutions. For now, I very like this idea, and I'm looking forward for the next updates to see if they will manage to leave as good an impression later as they did this time.
Mm.
So looking at this, it sounds like GW has a plan, which is good because they have a schedule now. Sounds like the sort of the knee-jerk reaction erratas that they've been releasing 2 weeks after a codex or something like that, those might go away because now they will have an almost entire quarter of tournaments to observe, which is also interesting because I think they will be analyzing the stats, maybe not just their own stats, but I don't know, 40k stats or whatever, maybe tournament data. And it's actually cool because not only will it be well thought through, but also it might mean to the players who collect armies that if they have units that don't work today, in a quarter, they actually might start working. So you don't have to sell them immediately. You can, just wait for the next quarter and see if your unit starts to work, which I think is nice and will be quite refreshing. But isn't, quarterly frequency a bit too often?
I thought about it, and I think that we'll have to wait for next and see how many changes. Because in the first balance Dataslate, this is a big changes. Of course, we'll later this podcast will discuss the details, but the changes are quite big. In the next 3 months, we can get just small changes, and if it's small changes, that it will be easy to adapt the meta game to these changes. So at this stage, I don't have the answer. I just don't know, and I'm not able to foresee what's going to if it's good idea to have that fresh of updates or not. It depends on what the exact content of the updates will be.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And we don't have that many codices for the next 3 months announced, at least. So I also think it might not be that as big as this one. But yeah, like Majson said, we'll have to wait and see how big the changes are that these bring, and adapt to the meta, as the saying goes.
Totally.
Right, so maybe let's go through those changes in the order they appear in the Dataslate. So the first is the big one, and your latest list is definitely impacted by it. So the universal matched play rule that says that you can only take 1 aircraft playing a combat patrol or incursion sized game, no more than 2 for 2,000 points, and then 3 if you're playing above that.
So basically, this limits us to 2 aircraft models for the most standard format, so 2K points. And my personal impression is that it's a very good change because there's always a problem with aircraft models, because basically they just work like shooting with no line of sight. So you can just reach any place on the table and just shoot stuff from there. And if the aircraft model is just too efficient, like Admech planes, it just breaks the game, because the opponent do not have any countermeasures to this. If the player playing aircraft model spam starts the game, it's not a game. It's just a simple shootout. So.
Yeah, it's a roll-off.
It's just a roll-off, but also it happened before, because we got some lists with Eldar flyer spam. They tried to fix that with point increases, and basically when these points got increased, we do not see Eldar planes anymore, because they're not as efficient as before.
Mm-hmm.
So this rule is something that I like, because it avoids for aircraft spam, and it's good, I think. And it's of course it's better than just increasing points of every plane, because then we'll not see planes in the game anymore.
It seems that GW has been struggling with planes ever since they were really introduced. I've even seen opinions on the internet that they should be completely removed from the game, which I think, first of all, will never happen, because they are, 1, beautiful models that people want to have and use, and 2, well, they have a tactical meaning, right? Because you can not only just fly and shoot and so on, but you can also move, block, and so on. So it adds another layer of complexity to the game, which is good in a way. But if you bring 6 and they all do the same and they just wipe your opponent turn 1, I think earlier this week I listened to the Honest Wargamer. That's another podcast that I can plug here because I think it's of high value. And in that podcast, they said that it was very important that games and how they were broken were live streamed on the internet, and people both in the hobby and outside of the hobby, they could see how broken the game is right now. Because if you watch a tournament and you see the top table game, the final, being resolved in a single turn because the planes shoot everything off the table, and there you go. That's the end of the game. That's what happened at the LGT. That's what happened at SoCal. GW has probably finally realized that this is not something that they would like to show people around the world, that this is what the game is about. So I think this change is motivated also by this. That simply it happened too often that the planes made or have completely broken the game. There have been countless discussions on on the Polish Discord, on Facebook groups that I'm in, people giving ideas like maybe let's reintroduce scatter dice, or maybe let's have the planes just one use per game in one turn and then they fly away and don't come back or something like that. But none of those ideas is really good, because if you still can bring 6, it destroys the game even for a single turn. So it's a welcome change.
Right, yeah, definitely. So let's go into the next update. Let's talk about the Astra Militarum one, because obviously we can go through the Admech points later on, as there's a whole page, even though not all of those have changed. So some interesting things here, but before we go into them, do you guys think that this indicates that a codex for Imperial Guard is not around the corner, that it's not going to come too soon, or should we not judge on this?
I think that we shouldn't judge on this because we never know what's the GW schedule for codexes. I think that they identified that Imperial Guard is not that powerful, but so they decided to put some buffs on here, and they seem interesting. And because Guard was my first army, so I will always come back to this army. They basically changed put some 3 small changes. They increased the save characteristic for Leman Russ models to 2 up, and they changed a little bit orders. Now the tank orders can target any vehicle, and for infantry orders, we can issue additional order of the same kind to the second unit. There's all of the infantry orders can be doubled, but the special ones, so the regiment specific and move is also banned from being doubled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so these are the changes. Do it help? Yes, but I think they do not fix the problem that Imperial Guard has right now.
What problems are those? Is it overcosted across the board, or it's something else? Because I in one of the episodes we've had where we had Kupcha over, I get the impression that Guard struggle with the play style of 9th edition in general, where we play on dense tables terrain-wise, and then you also have to come forwards to grab the objectives and play the objectives game, which a strictly shooty army, as you could say Guard is, without souping in stuff, would struggle. But maybe you can verify if my opinion makes any sense.
Yeah, exactly. This is the problem. The 9th edition play style is different than before, and Guards do not have any toolkit to make exchanges in the middle of the table. So we do not have some small close combat related units that can grab the objective from the opponent, and this is the main problem. And On the other hand, we got two, let's say, playstyles with guards. We can go infantry-heavy armies and vehicle-heavy armies, and basically both of these playstyles gives a lot of secondary points to the opponent. Either it is no prisoners or breaking down secondaries. This becomes the auto pick for the opponent. So not only we cannot fight for primary points, but also give away secondary points, easy secondary points to the opponent.
It seems like Guard is missing that sort of staying power on the table. And you know, in 8th edition, where you had to capture an objective at the end of the round, and this is where you scored, Guard was very good at that. You know, they could just run with their even like cheap units that have OPSEC, grab an objective, steal an objective from an opponent, and score. Now, if they need to catch an objective and then stay alive on that objective till the next round, this is where it becomes an issue. And units like, as you said, the units that used to be good, that used to fight a lot and had that staying power, like Bullgryns, for example, they don't work right now very well. So unless they get some new rules, Guard might still have a problem with the current rule set.
Yeah, and also just increasing saves when we do not have any invulnerable saves on the vehicles, then it just do not matter in such a in current state of the game where we got a really powerful shooting like the Admech or even Dark Elder Dark Lances can get rid of Lemon Risk models, even if they do have this 2-up save. It just do not help that much. But yeah, I'm happy to see some changes, but I think that Guard players will still need to wait for the codex.
Yeah, and on the topic of codex, to answer Jeffrey's question, I'm surprised because Guard is in this data slate, in this patch, as I call it, but we do not have Tau and we do not have Eldar, for example, two armies that I think desperately need some updates as well, which I would argue that those are the two factions that are probably going to get another codex at the beginning of the year, especially that GW has rumored that, or someone has rumored that GW will release an Eldar codex early next year. So if we get another box with Eldar versus Tau, for example, that could resolve their problems, and it might also mean that Astra Militarum will get a codex later. But yeah, we don't have a glass ball, we don't know, so we have to wait.
Okay, let's move on. I think we've talked about enough about Astra Militarum. Good to have an update for them. Chaos Space Marines, any thoughts on that? They are now angry against everyone, as the article on the Warhammer community said, I think, and Death to the False Emperor now triggers against anyone, not just Imperium, and they've also changed it so that it's not an additional attack, but an additional hit instead, so you don't have to roll the dice in addition. So is that going to help the Chaos Space Marines who are still longing for their second wound?
I think that they still need their second wound, but nevertheless, this is very interesting change. First of all, I do not see unmodified hit roll wording here, which
which is a theme in 9th.
Yeah, and the second thing is that my impression is that GW tries to avoid strict buffs versus specific army. So before we got this rule that affects only Imperium and was useless against any other stuff. And I do not recall any rule that's strictly in a 9th edition that strictly is dedicated against one specific army or set of armies.
There are a lot of anti-psycho rules. That's kind of anti-specific faction.
Yeah, but not something against, for example, Tau or Imperium.
Yeah, I agree that it's interesting that it's no longer against the Imperium, although the rule is called death to the false emperor, which would suggest that it is the Imperium still. But effectively, it turns chaos into space wolves in a way, in that exploding sixes. I mean, that's nice. That's good. And to your question, whether it's whether they are still waiting for their second wound, probably chaos players will hate me right now. But do they need that second wound? I mean, there are so many weapons right now that erase Space Marines from the table, with two damage. Does it change, or would it change much for the Chaos Space Marines to have that one wound more? And Joker, that's a question mainly to you because you play Chaos.
I think it does. I mean, you can see how much better the Thousand Suns are now, and it is mainly power armor that's playing, and the Terminators even more so. And they did get an additional wound, and I think it changes a huge boatload because they didn't change all that much apart from that. I mean, they've got one new data sheet, and which obviously is useful. A couple of good relics and stratagems that they didn't have before, but the units themselves didn't change that much, and it makes a lot of difference. Maybe not the second wound on the power armor guys, regular guys, but like that third wound on the Terminators, that goes a long way.
Oh yeah, that's a valid point. Definitely, I forgot about that and how much I don't know, Grey Knights or the ordinary Terminators actually got from that. So
yeah, and it's still better defense against small arms fire, which is always there somewhere, and mortal wound spam, which quite a couple of armies can dish out quite a lot of them. And not just psych heavy ones. You also have sisters that can dish out mortal wounds, Admech bombs, etc. So yeah, I think it would help them a lot as well.
So maybe in the next Dataslate then, we'll see. All right, so I think we skipped Admech to get to it, on the second page of this Dataslate. I think we can do the same about Drukhari. So let's jump to Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights. And again, Towering Foe. The model counts as 5 models when determining control of an objective marker. A Titanic model counts as 10 models. Is that a welcome change, or is it unnecessary? And I'll start with Joker, just because again you have some Chaos Knights. You've been playing them in the previous edition. Does this make you want to clean them up and bring them to the next tournament?
It does, actually, in a way, but I'm not going to because I'm waiting for a 9th edition codex, as I've already got 2 armies with 9th edition codices that I haven't played that much, so they get the priority. But these changes are amazing, I think. I mean, we've already seen lots of the small knights making good results or close to good results, and now having them both OPSEC and counting as 5 models at that, it's just amazing. It's a very welcome change, unexpected one, so all the better. This one's really good, I think. So Knights obviously struggled on the primary points. They still struggle on secondaries, and they need help with that. Like I know now the Chaos ones can do a little bit of summoning, hopefully to help with that, and bring in a squad of Furies to do scramblers or that sort of jazz. But yes, I mean, I just can't make the point enough that this is a big welcome change.
Okay, Majson, do you see any threat in Imperial Knights or Chaos Knights now? I mean, is the matchup against them going to be more challenging?
For sure, I'm going to put my knights off the shelf and to give them a chance for at least one tournament, because it's very convenient army to play, and I see these changes as very good, because this basically fixes one of the problems that knights have. So now OPSEC on the small knights is very, very welcome, and it's very, very powerful, because now they basically count as 5 models on the objective. So the opponent do not have that easy way to get our objectives.
Yeah, I can see how I can already see with my imagination how Banya and Asarni are enjoying this update, because they've been playing like a mix of demons and small knights, bigger knights, and so on. So this only boosts their mix even more. So yeah, can't wait to see how they do in tournaments as well. Right.
It's worth pointing out that you only get OPSEC if your whole army is knights. So in Banya's build, they won't get it because he has a demon attachment or two.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's a valid point. I didn't pay attention to it. But it does say all vehicle models with the Imperial Knights or Chaos Knights faction. Yeah, absolutely. So good spot.
It's actually the second bullet point. Every model from your army has either the Chaos Knights or Imperial Knights faction keyword. But never mind, you got it in the end. Shall we move on to Necrons?
Yeah.
So the boost to Necrons, I think it's a boost, probably is, but they've got core given to a bunch of units, which reading stuff on the Polish Discord is a pretty hefty boost, because now you can Veil of Darkness, a lot more units that can actually do something rather than a blob of warriors. It's just an example, of course. So Majson, any thoughts on this one?
Our Necron colleagues tell us that this is a big change for the Necron army power. Necrons struggled from being one of the first codexes in the 9th edition. So while the Feather codexes got a lot units with core keyword, the Necrons got 2 or 3. I don't remember, just basic troops and 1 or 2 more core models, and this stopped Necrons from using multiple buffs on some very popular units that, for example, destroyers that were at least in Poland. The destroyers was a basic tool for in nearly every Necrons army last edition. So and they stopped working because they couldn't be buffed anymore. And now we can just put all the buffs back on destroyers. We can Veil of Darkness them. We can do a lot of tricks, but of course you have to give players some time to test it and to see and verify if this is really if this really helps Necrons to get back to the top tier armies.
I mean, taking into consideration what we've heard from our guests previously, Necrons didn't suck exactly. I mean, they were already a good army for team compositions.
For team compositions, for team tournaments, these were the OPSEC Necrons were and are very good because basically as a defender they can select a table. Which is either an open table for combat-oriented opponent, and this is a closed table for shooting armies, and they always can give some points. And if you basically, there's no chance to win 20-0 against Necrons who selected the table. And this is a very good toolkit in pairings because you can just throw a Necrons defender, and if the opponent puts as attackers some good armies, then you just take the good army from the opponent, and the rest of the pairings just goes easier because
they do sound like a tar pit army, so to say, for a team tournament. And then any boosts to that, and this clearly is a boost, is definitely welcome. So it's going to be very interesting to see how team tournaments pan out in the future. Anything else on the Necrons, or are we moving to the next faction, the Orks? I'll take silence as let's move.
Yeah, sounds like Orks it is.
Orks it is. All right. A change for Orks that says when mastering an Orks army, it cannot include more than 1 of each of the following units, and all the crazy names of the little buggies that they can field. So is that a big change? Is that going to change a lot in the Orky playstyle right now? So let's not forget there is a change in the amount of planes that they can bring, and now also only 1 unit of each kind of buggies. is that a nerf? Can we call it a nerf for the Orks? Majson, what do you think?
Definitely yes, because yeah, you saw the recent Ork list. That's just 9 artillery buggies and 9 scrap jets, and this is kind of an absurd army for me, because
Who needs that many cars?
yeah, and this is something that if you do not start against this army, this just destroys anything, any target, because they do not have like a planes. So you don't have to see anything. You just fire with your squeak buggies to everything that's hidden, and if something is in the open table, then you just kill it with scrap jets. It's still hitting on 5s on and 4s for squeak buggies, but the amount of shooting here is so big that it's very challenging for the opponent to stay against this firepower. And this changes entire concept for the Ork army. Now you cannot spam the most efficient buggies. You have to select a different kinds of buggies, and it's for me personally it's also a welcome change. I think that Ork players can be a little bit disappointed because they of course collected models, and the major issue that I found, and also my Ork colleagues tell me that they're disappointed with that because they just wanted this nerf to come in some different way. Because one unit of each, it also blocks the small one buggy units, which are more fun to play than the big free model units. And for them, it's very disappointing.
Yeah, the 3 model units actually, I think they suffer, if they get locked in combat, because all 3 get locked. They also, it's more difficult for them to move around the table because they need to move in 3s and not just like a single buggy that, runs on the side of the table on one flank or on the other flank. You need to move all 3. So it does have serious implications. And if you can only take one kind of unit, then yeah, if somebody charges you, your unit is effectively blocked from shooting and so on. So it's very meaningful.
Yeah, and also they suffer from leadership tests. So that's a small but sometimes impactful.
Do they explode?
Yeah, also.
Right. So if they explode very close to the remaining models in the unit as well. So that's like mortal wounds to the models from the same unit as well, which is another sort of painful thing if you think about it.
Yep. Well, it could have been done 3 models, but it is what it is.
On the other hand, they will get serious buffs in the new Octarius book. So I think that we'll still complain on the Orks in near future, but hopefully it will not be complaining about 9 squeak buggies destroying the army in one turn.
Yeah, because that's just ridiculous. You can't do anything about it. 9 buggies, 6 planes. Yeah, well played. Right, so I think we've covered the Orks, so let's go into the points changes for, and these have been done for Admech and Drukhari. So first up are Admech, and then in that case, it's over to you, Majson. Walk us through them. What changed, what stayed the same,
Okay, so,
what does it mean for the army?
So basically, we got a couple of units increased in points. So now Skitari Rangers and Vanguards got 1 point, costs 1 point more, 9 points per model. Sicarians went up. I believe it's for 2 points. Iron Striders for 10 points, and all kinds of planes, not the transport one, but Stratoraptor and the Bomber went up 20 points. And one thing that is also impactful, Cerberus Riders went up 4 points. So basically all of units that I used to play with my list during the Heresy and then our team tournament went up in points. And I'm not surprised about it because majority of those were seriously undercosted. This standard Admech list went up about 200 points above what was previously played. So it's quite big. Is it enough for the changes? I'm not sure because they didn't change any mechanic in the Admech. So we don't have any updates to the rule set. We just got the plain point increases. And so we still do have this ridiculous combo with Lucius Rangers. So we can get Transhuman, Ignore AP, and high save on the big blobs of infantry. We still do have this Mars Canticle plus Doctrine combination. For example, Iron Striders, everything costs up. But we still do have these models and do have this rule set that make it work before. My list for now just lost two bombers, and I'm still going to stick with 2 planes Stratoraptors because they're just too good. Basically, I replaced 2 bombers with 1 Iron Strider, and it's still more or less the same list and the same playstyle that was before.
So, yep, do those changes actually bring Admech to the cost that they or to the values that they should have? So, is the army now costing what it should cost?
The costs right now are okay. What I would also change for this army is to add some buff limitation. For example, just 1 command buff per turn per unit would work, because the problem with this army is not with the units. Of course, the units are good and so on and so on, but in this rule set that gives us a lot of rules, and by the rules perspective, it's one of the most complicated armies because we do have tons of different rules that can affect our units. We got doctrines, canticles, we got command buffs, relics, and world trace that also works on not as an aura or just usually as some kind of command buff. And we can get a lot of this, and we have to remember, and they stack. And even, for example, if some kind of unit will go much higher or got much higher point increase, the other one would still be able to get these buffs. And of course, we'll see in the upcoming days how this point increases affected the holistic view about this army. But I believe that something should be done also about this rule set for the Admech, just to make it work in line with the other codexes.
I remember reading in the Polish Discord, especially by the people who play Admech and who are part of different Admech-related groups on Facebook. Those people said that those groups aren't really, you can hear like annoyed screeching and so on. People aren't really bothered that much. It seems like everyone was expecting those changes, and those changes haven't hit anyone in the balls, really. Those are, expected changes. No one's surprised, and people took it lightly. Is it the same about you? So are you disappointed by any of this, or were you just sitting there expecting a nerf?
For me, it's the worst army I played regarding the fun that I got from the game, because the games were not complicated. So they usually ended in 2 turns, and you can see the results. And so the nerf was coming and expected. We'll see now, but I wonder if the playstyle will be changed any factor with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Shall we move to your army, Joker? Do you want to tell us something about the Drukhari and their changes?
Sure. I mean, so first at the top, the Archon got a 5-point increase, if I'm not mistaken. Okay-ish. I wouldn't say that was exactly expected or necessary, but here it is. Then the Succubus got a 20-point increase. Now that's probably deserved because obviously everyone knows about 2 murder girls running around in the Cult of Strife, dealing loads of damage, being a one-man army almost. So yeah, that's definitely well deserved. The Homunculus is down by 10 points. That's interesting. Probably to bring or to kind of encourage more variety in this building. Then going into troops, the big one is an increase of witches by 2 points and increase in the favored retinues. So on Trueborn and Blood Brides on 1 point per model. So if you're taking Blood Brides, it's actually a 3-point change on a model. For me, that I'm probably not taking a 10-man unit of witches anymore, although those Skitari blobs are still a target that they go into nice. So yeah, that's very. I still need to think a bit about that. Then a surprising thing for me, at least, the Archon hasn't been changed, and we could see, at least in our Polish meta, that is a very popular choice, with some people bringing 2 full-sized courts. Well, almost full-sized. I mean, you can theoretically take 60 models, but no one does that because that wouldn't fit in a radar. Grotesques went down by 5, so that's interesting. I guess you can make a target out of these with the -1 damage obsession. But yeah, they still don't have a save, so we'll see. Incubi up by 2, disappointing, but again, well deserved because they just delete anything they go in, almost. Hellions are another unit that is surprisingly unchanged. Then we've got, just looking at randomly, both of the flyers went down by 10, but I don't know, they're not that good as the Ork or Admech ones, so I don't think people will be taking them particularly much. Raiders went up by 10, so yeah, that's probably again deserved, but I don't think people are going to substantially drop the amount of raiders they take. Talos down by 10, interesting. Same for Ravagers, although I don't think that's that big of a change. And Kronos went up by 5, so that's not that big of a difference, but obviously a 6 Kronos lists were very popular recently, so that's 30 points they'll have to find elsewhere.
So doesn't that Dataslate just maybe not scream, but say, play Covens, because there are significant point drops in the Coven costs.
Yeah, there are. I mean, those are the only things that did get a points drop, and you might hear some voices saying that. I still don't think the Covens have that much to offer. Maybe I just can't play them, but the Cronoses don't speak to me. But then again, they actually got points increased, so maybe not them.
From what we discussed with Skari, I remember he said that he takes Talos and he is very happy with them because they move up the board, they are tough, they hit like a truck. So maybe with points drops in Talos, we will see more of them now.
Yeah, that's possible. I think that they're interesting. They're nice with the -1 damage, and then maybe in the same detachment you could take some grotesques, but I don't know. It's not exactly my playstyle. So just to sum up, let's say the point changes itself. So I think on the average competitive Drukhari list, that's about 150 point increase. So obviously, this probably means dropping a single raider or something on the witches, I think, because those are the The witches, I think, are the unit to go or to scrap, if you will. But we'll see.
Okay, Majson, a question to you. From a perspective of a very good Admech player, have the Dark Eldar ever been a challenge to you? And do you think that those changes will make or break the army?
Yeah, so this matchup for me was always dependent on the table that I faced. So in the open table, it's just a shootout and very easy pairing for the Admech. And on the closed table, it's easier for Drukhari. And basically, it looked like if I do start and destroy enough raiders, it's a win for me. And if Drukhari starts and kills my planes with Dark Lances, then we can fight for a couple of turns. But these changes are also welcome for me because the Drukhari was undercosted. I also played, for example, Sisters against Drukhari, and there was such a lot of small Drukhari units that were so efficient that they could do right anything on the table. They just this standard matchup with Drukhari looks like they go in the first turn, they just arrive at the middle of the table, and on the second turn, everything from the Drukhari army just comes to the other deployment zone and charges everything. And it was such a lot of multiple small units and these characters that just engaged in combat on entire opponent army, and it was so efficient that it worked. And now we do have some less units or less toolkit, for example. So we need to find something else to work with. I'm not sure because we still do have this Court of the Archon problem because these units are also undercosted, in my opinion. But the other stuff is much more fair costed. We'll still have this characters problem. So we got Razor and Succubuses for which are extremely efficient, but in the end, we'll need to also make some tests and see if now, for example, Sisters can compete with current Drukhari. Yeah. And for the Admech, Admech versus Drukhari matchup, I think that it will look the same. But now that the Drukhari, for example, cannot get or it's extremely costly to get 2 Trueborn squads, it makes this pairing a little easier for Admech. From my first impression, because I haven't managed to test the new rules yet.
Mm-hmm. Right. Joker, a question to you, because, back in 8th, I used to play Dark Eldar as well, and I remember that a staple in the army were 3 Ravagers with, disintegrators, but still. Now, I came back after a year of a break. Gone are the Ravagers completely. Like, you don't see them anymore. Do you think that after those changes, it is more like a Ravager or maybe 3 Ravagers will start appearing in lists?
I've been recently thinking about bringing one, maybe, but no, I don't think so. I mean, the Ravagers, they don't offer that much. If it's freelance shots, I mean, they still need to see something, and usually, especially with Drukhari, you want that terrain layout to be very dense so that you can hide your frail units and then just eat the opponent in combat. And the Ravagers don't bring anything to that game. So it's a bit of a backfield unit that just shoots. And for that cost, you probably prefer to have another Raider and putting those 20 points difference somewhere else.
Okay, fair enough.
So I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad unit, but
there are better ones.
So much goodness, across the other data sheets that it'll still probably struggle to find a staple place in lists.
Okay, so tell me this, and this is a question to both of you. So I think if we sum up this data slate, this patch, as I like to call it, we see nerfs to the most dominating armies. We see some buffs for armies that maybe haven't seen so much play or desperately needed those buffs. But especially about those nerfs, do you think that they mean that we will now see more sisters, Thousand Suns, or I don't know, Grey Knights, just because armies like Admech and Drukhari have been keeping the ones that I just mentioned in check? Or it's not changing that much because that 100 or 200 point difference for those dominating armies doesn't really translate to a drop in power? Majson, what do you think?
It's always a tough question to answer right now, because we haven't seen much games, so we can only rely on theory. And my theory is that the Admech will play more or less the same playstyle and list, at least for upcoming dates. And Drukhari will also play something like before, because these are just as good as they were before. And even the new armies, the other armies that can fight them. For example, Sisters versus Admech. Now the Sisters got a very high chance to maybe not to win, but also to get some points in this matchup. Because previously against the Sisters, the planes were the problem, and now we got maximum 2 planes. When the Sisters start the game, they can just get rid of at least 1 plane, and the game is more or less open. If there are some terrains on the table, then the game can result even in Sisters' victory. For example, Thousand Suns were a pretty good counter to Admech. Maybe counter not in terms that they win every pairing with Admech, but the counter in terms of team play, where the Thousand Suns played for a draw with Admech. Now they can play for a victory. We need to check these pairings again and see how they were affected with these updates, because we haven't managed to play many tests, and the practice always verifies everything. So
yeah, so there are some upcoming tournaments. I think there is the later in this year, in December, or maybe even in November, there is a meeting of people who potentially might want to apply to the national team. So I think that will be like at least 2 days of intensive play testing and intensive checking. Plus, there are a bunch of tournaments that have been announced as well. So yeah, we can have that conversation in a month or two, and then we shall see, has the meta shifted in any way? But definitely, yeah, as we said, welcome changes. So I think we've covered the data slate in general. Maybe, last question from me, really. Majson, do you think, looking at what GW is doing with this, how they are clearly reacting, maybe not to the survey that they did, because that's, I think, a little bit too soon, and they couldn't have analyzed all the answers so quickly, but they've definitely listened to players in this one. Do you think that this indicates a change in GW's approach to the game, that maybe they want to actually turn it into an esport and have a closer look at the rules and make it a competitive game that applies to many players, or draw new players maybe with a balanced sort of set of armies? Is that the way that GW is trying to go?
For me, as a competitive player, I hope so. But I doubt that they are going to prioritize the esport or the sport approach, because there are always a lot of players that plays Warhammer 40k for for the narrative games, for
Yeah, Crusade or
Crusades and so on, and they're usually very angry when such a balance or patches arrives, because yeah, they do not see this as a problem, because they do not use 6 planes in one game. But yeah, and I hope that they're going in that direction, but I doubt it. I'm very happy that this Dataslate arrived, and because just a couple of days before, I just didn't want to play this game, because it was so stupid to just go first and win in 15 minutes. It's just ridiculous. Now, when this arrived, suddenly I got new ideas. I think about my armies and what can I get. I just want to get my knights off the shelf and just put maybe paint them and try to play a game with them, because maybe they are not the best army, but now it makes sense to test it and to try to do something.
Yeah, that sounds like the biggest win of this Dataslate. That people actually are considering, picking up an army that has been collecting dust for a longer while, and they want to put it on the table. I think that's something that GW has done absolutely right with this. The rest we'll see, but just the fact that people want to touch something that they haven't touched for a while is amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's also a common opinion, at least in our local community. It's also the same approach, that they're happy that this arrived, and everyone were just tired of Admech and Drukhari problem, and yeah. I just hope that we will also solve the upcoming Tyranids problem and Hiveguard problem, but probably they just do not know about it yet.
Do you think that their play testers haven't predicted 18 Hiveguard?
When they released the rules, I lost my hope in this playtest. So.
Right, Joker, I haven't asked you. So, what do you think about the way forward? Do you think that this is the way to go, that they might turn it into a sport? Or is it, only going to focus on things that are broken, maybe things that do not work? Or maybe it's going to be bound to their release schedule, and it's just a trick that they are playing on us? What do you think?
Probably a bit of both. I mean, there has to be some sort of incentive. It's a corporation after all, isn't it? Either way, it's good to have this release, and hopefully they keep up and they come in timely. Although, like Majson just said, Tyranid 1 is probably way overdue already. But yeah, and you can see that they are organizing their own events as well. So there is some incentive that they might want to build a competitive scene of sorts that they support. And we'll just have to wait and see how it pans out, because obviously that must have been planned before, but the pandemic probably delayed that. So we'll see. And hopefully we get all the codices for the edition, and then see if we get to play around with it a bit before a new one comes out.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see, how they time those updates. Like, if they say that it's going to be a quarterly release, will it be a reliable release that we can count on, like at the end of the quarter or in the middle of the quarter? This time it's in the middle of the quarter. In the future, we shall see. They are probably learning how to do this as well, so we need to wait. But I would be curious to see if this could, again, make or break those major events like WTC, for example. If there is a cutoff date and suddenly they release a data slate like this one after the cutoff date, would that mean that the major tournament is going to move the cutoff date to include the new rules because nobody wants to play with the old ones, or not? So yeah, I'm curious to see how tournament organizers are going to adapt to that. but we shall see. That I'll ask. We are going to talk to Zach Addington in one of the future episodes, so I'll leave that question for him, I guess. Okay, Majson. So it's been a pleasure to have you. I hope we can repeat that in the future, and yeah, fingers crossed that all your ambitions game-wise come to fruition.
Thank you.
Joker, it's been a pleasure to co-host this with you, and yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, cheers.
Thanks, cheers.
And to all our listeners, please like us, subscribe us. This helps our ranges. This helps us to reach more people. So we're relying on you on this one. And yeah, thank you for listening. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.